Hi, and welcome to Over the Target. I'm Lee Smith, and we have a really fun and interesting show today. We have fun and interesting shows all the time, but this is someone that I'm really keen to talk to. I always love speaking with this person, writer, intellectual, political commentator, and he's also the executive director of the Claremont Institute's Center for the American Way of Life. I want to make sure I have that right. Yes, the Center for the American Way of Life. Friend, colleague, role model, Arthur Milikh. Arthur, welcome to Over the Target. Thank you so much for being here today. And congratulations. I should say, congratulations on your book. We spoke with Roger Kimball recently about his fantastic essay. We spoke about art. We had a great conversation about aesthetics. We talked about all sorts of great things. We talked about painting. And he has an essay in this fantastic new book that you edited. I have the galleys. You have the book, so I'm going to ask you to hold it up as I'm holding it up. There it is. We're up from conservatism, revitalizing the right after a generation of decay. You've edited the book. You've put together a fantastic roster of writers here, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get a lot of them coming on here to talk about their pieces and other things they're thinking about. But congratulations, thank you, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Lee. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, that's very kind. So let's talk about the book. Why this was important. Why it was important to I mean, it's a program, what you have here, right? That's the point of the book. It's not just an anthology of lots of interesting writers like Michael Anton, David Azerrad, Helen Andrews, great writer. I always love reading her work. I love following her on social media. But it's not just a great anthology. You've got a program here. Why is this necessary at this particular time?
Well, look, it's a good question. It's the right way to begin. I think the answer is very simple. The right is very confused about what it should be doing. It is confused because it fears the left. It's confused because it doesn't really know where it's going, and it cannot account for the losses that it has suffered for a long time, but in particular over the last generation. So this book is a way of coming to terms with the vast losses, issue by issue, that the establishment right has suffered, to account for the very bad direction into which the country is going, and to provide a way to rethink each issue, each national level issue, big tech, trade, foreign policy, immigration, all of the issues that matter to a civilization, in order to correct course. Because my fear, and I think I speak for many of the authors in this book, although I'm obviously hesitant to do so, but I think what unites us is this fear that the nation really is slipping away. And I know that the right has for a very long time said such words. The nation is slipping away. Our liberty is slipping away. And in some ways, they may have been right in the past, but today it's a different circumstance. And the reason that the circumstance is different is if you just take a look around, you see that the left really does control not just the main institutions, the main power centers of the country, major parts of the press, with the obvious exception of the Epoch Times and others. But I mean, we have to be honest about the power of the press and where it leans. Big tech, so in other words, the space where speech can take place. Universities, K-12, the administrative state, and now more and more, obviously Lee Smith's work on this is par excellence, the intel state, and more the top brass of the military. So the circumstances are truly very different and unlike we have had ever in this country's history. And so now is the time. It should have been done maybe 10 years ago, but now is the most obvious time to rethink where we should go issue by issue. And this book, as I mentioned, is an attempt to do that, and it's the only one of its kind.
I mean, there's some of the authors. Some of the authors in your book are more pessimistic than you are. Michael Anton is not as pessimistic in his essay here, but typically he's very, I think generally, well, I mean, he sees things very clearly, right? And I think he believes that things can go one way or another. But there are people who are going to hear what you're saying, that it's too late. We've already moved into something else. The constitutional order has been laid to waste. So how do we pick up the pieces and move on from here? So you're saying it's not too late. We're still I mean, obviously, it's not a time of normal politics, but there's still different things that we can do.
Yes, and I would urge us, our side, against what the
Mm.
kids on the internet call the black pill.
Ah.
That means a kind of
Mm.
hopelessness that it's over.
Mm.
And I would urge against it for two reasons. Number one, uh, there is a kind of self satisfaction that comes from saying that I'm black pill, which is to say, you believe that you have accessed necessity. You know precisely where it's going, and you have withdrawn from the world based on that. And people like having that kind of certain knowledge. And I think that in politics, the case is never closed, especially in America.
Mm.
I know we are always brainstorming, with friends. You ask, what are you hopeful about? What are you hopeful about? But the truth is that even if the order, the system that we're used to may be over or modified, there are still, number one, a lot of people, a lot of intelligent, productive, maybe even fierce people that live in this country. And two, and this is the main reason that I urge against the black pill, is because there are still avenues available to us that we have not fully thought through, that
Mm.
we don't have a muscle memory of it, which we can use in clever, interesting, maybe even wonderful ways. That when we're black pilled, when we're hopeless, we close off all thoughts of that kind of creativity. And so I think that you're right that the situation is not politics as normal, not America as normal, but there are a variety of potentialities that have to be explored now because at the end of the day, look, we're people and we have to live here. And there are a lot of us.
Look, when you're talking about the black pill, I mean, the way you're describing it is you're speaking about despair, right? And this
Yeah.
isn't a political condition. This is a spiritual condition. And there's something else you said before. You were talking about um, you were talking about in some ways the right fears the left. So I want to talk that you also talked about that we fear we're losing our republic, which you know would which I take as a different sort of fear. But the fear of the left and the despair that you're describing with the black pill. So I don't mean to switch gears immediately, but you're describing it really is a spiritual condition as well as a political condition. How how is that addressed?
Well, it's addressed by, you mean in the book?
Generally, I mean, we got into the stuff about black pill, and I think you're describing a lot of people, a lot of incredibly smart people, right? On Twitter, on social media, we see with a lot of different writers, a lot of different writers from the right, and if we can look at the people on the left who are triumphalist, this is their moment. I actually don't think that's the way it is. I actually think they're quite nervous about how
Yes.
things have spun out of control, so they don't really know where they're going. But I think the analogous position on the right, in lots of ways, is despair. What will we do? We've lost everything. We're losing our republic, and it strikes me that that's not a useful position uh, to be fighting from. To despair, because there is no next move after despair, and of course despair is a sin, right? But it's not a great position to be in,
Yes, the left wants us to despair.
right?
The left
Yeah.
wants us to actually and metaphorically retreat.
Hmm.
They want us to take our children, to go into the woods, to do homeschooling, to live on farms, to be removed, because they know that after that, the spirit to fight and reconquer,
Hmm.
to own space and to take back institutions is over. So I think that there's a very unhealthy streak in the right that needs to be corrected. And I think that the streak can actually be characterized in the way that we've done kind of K 12
Hmm.
in the last, I don't know, generation or two. So, first, the public schools were taken from us,
Hmm.
which is to say that doctrines were started to be taught that separated parents from children, that made children turn on their parents and on their
Hmm.
nation. And what we did was we had one silver bullet, which was called school choice. And we thought that that could be the release valve for us. But in fact, that was an act of being chased out. And now, as many of the charter schools are themselves going left, and that will continue to happen, we are now being chased out into homeschooling. And so it's this spiritual element of the right that is defeatist, that doesn't have a sense that no, we are going to reconquer, we are going to own these things, we're going to take them back, come hell or high water. That kind of moral confidence is what I'm advocating for, and I think it's perfectly plausible that such things would take place in various parts of the country and hopefully spreading with time to the rest of it. So I think that rediscovering that spirit within us, that ferocity in us, is very much possible, and it needs to be unlocked.
This is fantastic. I should mention, by the way, that you've co-authored an essay in the book on education, K through 12, and higher education, and that's a fascinating point you make. As I note in the piece that you're not saying homeschooling is bad. It's great that parents want to protect their children from the garbage they're getting in public school. But you're right. It's a fascinating point. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why are we retreating from these places that are actually, represented in popular culture? And many of us will remember that education, that public education, is a place where we meet friends. We learn how to do different things. We become more adventurous. We're challenged in different ways, not always educationally, but people are challenged in different ways. But right, the idea of retreating from this place, which is a very, very important it's a huge part of our public square. So why are we retreating from it and saying like, okay, you win, you can have it. Just give us a little room, and just give us a little room to teach our kids the things that we think are important, and don't bug us. And, we'll prepare them for, I mean, it's like, what world are we preparing them for if everyone else is being prepared for some sort of garbage in public education? So I think that's a really fascinating point. No, we're going to fight this, and we're going to fight on every possible front. Look, one of the things I wanted to ask you, you bring up in that great essay, you talk about something that hadn't really struck me before. We hear all these different complaints about the books and I mean, it's pornography that's being taught to kids, and in many cases preteens. So why? The point you raise is, which is great. Why aren't they arrested? How is this legal, right? We're having a fight. They get to categorize these books. Oh, how dare you censor books? You're just like Hitler. You're burning books, doing all these terrible things. That's not what it is. They're pushing pornography on children. How is this legally okay? Even on this front, where the people on the right are on the defensive.
Yeah. So look, and this, I just want to frame the question that you asked, because that kind of spirit that I just described, reactivating it, would lead to these kinds of things. That's what reconquest would look like. That's what the kind of self-confidence that it would take to reconquer institutions, states, parts of the country, hopefully the whole country, would require. Let me just make one comment so that our viewers can just understand that the left is not insane when it teaches pornography to kids. It's a core feature of leftism. I just want to say a word on that. It's
Yeah,
a core
how?
feature.
I want to know how. How is that?
Yeah. It's a core feature of leftism in two regards. Number one is because of feminism. And what I mean by that is that some of the very popular, extremely influential feminists of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, in a way, correctly believed that the way to break the so-called patriarchy is to liberate girls from the authority of their fathers and mothers, who would teach them to, I don't know, respect their sexuality, teach them to raise them to be mothers, etc. And the way to do that is you start as early as possible. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's like the Spartans, who start educating their children at a very young age to be warriors. Well, similarly here, if you are going to break the connection between mother and daughter and father and daughter, it has to be done as early as possible, so that the rebellions in the homes, and I don't mean rebellions like screaming matches. It actually shouldn't get to screaming matches, because the child should be slowly taken to view their sexuality in a contrary way to the way that their family taught them. Same thing would go for homosexual sexuality. That this should be developed, blossomed as early as possible so that there is no shame, no societal shame, no societal authorities that can govern it, but the sexuality itself would be its own thing without intervention of adults. So that's why they're doing this. They're not, I mean, in a way they're crazy. In a way they're just following this doctrine out. So to return more concretely to your question, so if a state passes a law that says such books are banned because they harm children, then states also have to have the kind of self-confidence necessary to stop the teaching of those texts. And this is a major problem on the right. We are we're scrap people in a way. We are half-measured people. We like to do the impressive, seemingly bold thing and never follow through. And the left is very good at following through. You can count on them. When they say they're going to do something, they'll do 80-90% of it eventually. Whereas we step off. So if you're going to stop as people on the right say, the sexualization of children, if you're going to stop the teaching of X, Y, and Z, then the laws have to be and can be used to stop those kinds of things. It's a very basic point, and everybody logically understands it. It's just that our imagination never goes there because we are used to being supplicants. We're used to begging for a little bit of mercy. We are used to begging for the left to just back off and give us some space so that we can be, in our rurals, left alone. But the whole point of this revitalization of the right partly comes from the insight that there is no space to hide.
Arthur, this is great. I want to come back. We got to cut away for a second because people are watching on YouTube and Facebook, and now we're going to Epoch TV exclusively. So all of you who are watching on Facebook or YouTube, God bless you. Make the jump to Epoch TV exclusively. We're going to continue our great conversation with Arthur Milikh. We're talking about one of the points I want to come back to. Arthur makes in this brilliant essay. Talks about how we have to admit that education is politicized, right? The point of it is to teach young people certain things, indoctrinate them in certain values, certain ideas, certain principles. And that's what the fight is over. What are the principles that we're going to teach them? Is it going to be based on things like breaking with the family, like pornography, or is it going to be about strong families, strong communities, a great country, a restoration of the republic? We're going away for less than a minute. Make sure you make the jump. Continuing our great conversation with the great Arthur Milikh. See you in a second. The center of corruption is the Department of Justice. Charles Grassley has been going after them, identifying how the FBI and DOJ withheld evidence from the American people, from Congress, for 6 years regarding Biden family corruption. Where is the rest of Congress?
Senator Grassley, joined by Chairman Comer, who's on the House side, they wrote a letter basically to the FBI and said, we are aware of the existence of a form that contains allegations regarding a bribery scheme involving Joe Biden himself. Then it turns out, hey, the document's real. They got it. There were 17 phone calls that the source had recorded involving Joe Biden or Hunter Biden talking about the bribery scheme. The FBI redacted that information to the American people. This is the FBI we're talking about. This is corruption of the president we're talking about. It's you get the documents, you get the witnesses, you get them under oath, you move forward. You don't play on their terms, you play on your terms.